Desh Dile and welcome to Tibet This Week. This is Sakina Bhatt with another edition of Weekly News on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's look at the headlines first. A happy world cannot exist without human compassion, His Holiness at Global Sea Learning Conference. CTA's researcher laments on China's 60 years of environmental destruction in Tibet. Governor of Chhattisgarh visits Menpad Tibetan settlement. US Congress will never recognize Chinese appointed Dalai Lama. The Conference of Global Social, Emotional and Ethical Learning Program, jointly launched by Emory University in collaboration with the Dalai Lama Trust and the Vana Foundation, took place in New Delhi on Thursday last week. Sharing his thought on the education for heart and mind, His Holiness remarked, "A happy world cannot exist without human compassion."
Through education, I think we can do something. So today's world, much problem is our own creation. This human being, nobody want a problem, but because of too much emotion, a lot of problem, including killing, with our own creation. So through prayer, cannot solve these things. Only through action. Action related with motivation. Then finally, I think this 21st century should be a century of peace, century of non-violence.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama unveils the Social, Emotional, Ethical Learning Curriculum with the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi, Manish Sisodia, and Nobel Peace Laureate Kailash Satyarthi at its global launch in New Delhi on Friday last week. The Dalai Lama is amongst the first thinkers of the 20th century to recognize that the gravest challenge facing humanity was not nuclear weapon or world war, but the silent erosion of the core human values that could over time trigger a global emotional crisis. In his latest and most distinguished contribution to the world, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, with the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory University, developed a comprehensive framework for the cultivation of social, emotional and ethical competencies for children in kindergarten to students in secondary education as well as higher education and professional education.
Emotional and ethical learning is the only thing that we, all human beings on the earth, are really looking for, and really we want this today. Especially at a time when the entire world is trying to solve the problems of hatred, problems of violence, through rules and laws being made by the governments every day, and the weapons being purchased every day. What we are trying to do, we are trying to buy peace through weapons. We are trying to buy peace, bring peace through law.
A long-cherished dream of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the innovative program is based on the universal secular ethics and is driven by his vision for a compassionate and ethical world for all.
Our intelligence use constructive way, we can do immense good things. Same time, this intelligence, you see, use destructive way, as I mentioned earlier, then really very, very harmful.
More than 600 educators in various countries have attended sea learning workshops. A high school curriculum is planned for 2020. His Holiness the Dalai Lama met with American philanthropist Bobby Sagar after 19 years when Sagar accompanied 47 youth global leaders to meet him on Monday this week. Addressing the gathering, His Holiness spoke about religious harmony and emphasized the importance of Nalanda tradition. His Holiness further spoke about the protection of the Tibetan environment and the preservation of the Tibetan culture.
Our intelligence should not become slave of our destructive emotion. No. Emotion there. But our intelligence have the ability to see the reality
Bobby Sagar had first met His Holiness the Dalai Lama 19 years ago when he had asked for a project to undertake, and His Holiness suggested that he should help facilitate science education in Tibetan monasteries. The Department of Education of Central Tibetan Administration also participated in the global launch of Sea Learning. The team of teachers and students from TCV, STS, and THF schools represented Tibetan schools on the international platform through Teachers Panel, Students Panel, and the World Fair presentation. China's latest white paper on Tibet once again highlights Beijing's absolute lack of understanding of Tibet's history and its unwillingness to read beyond government documents, says Tempa Gelsen, an environment research fellow at Tibet Policy Institute of CTA. The paper, Democratic Reform in Tibet, 60 Years On, was released on March 27, 2019, to mark the 60th year of Chinese occupation of the Tibetan Plateau and suppression of Tibetan people. The paper includes a brief chapter on Tibet's ecology, saying that in Old Tibet, with an extremely underdeveloped economy, people could only adapt to the natural environment. They used whatever they could exploit from nature. According to Tempa Gelsen, this outrightly undermines Tibet's glorious history and gives no credit for Tibetan people's environment conservation efforts for thousands of years.
The Chinese white paper once again highlights its absolute lack of understanding of Tibet's history. A chapter on Tibet's environment, it states that the Tibetan people had no ability to protect Tibet's environment in the past. This is absolute rubbish. In fact, it's the Tibetan people's effort for the last thousands of years that we have protected the world's highest plateau. It is only in the 1950s, as well as Chinese occupation of the Tibet plateau, that Tibet began to see unprecedented environmental destruction. The Chinese government carried out massive resource extraction, damming of Tibetan rivers, and also massive deforestation that led to 1998 Yangtze flood and 2010 Duchu flood. And then also, in recent years, there has been an influx of millions of Chinese migrants and tourists coming into Tibet. That also has inflicted massive footprint on the world's highest plateau, and that has caused large-scale environmental destruction.
The Honorable Governor of Chhattisgarh State, Srimati Anandiben Patel, explored the Tibetan community in Menpat and visited the Dhakpo Monastery on Sunday this week. Expressing her happiness on meeting the Tibetans in Menpat, Srimati Anandiben Patel mentioned in her speech about the significance of Buddhism and its contribution to mankind. She also recounted her visit to Tibet and said that the visit to Menpat Tibetan settlement was like a second visit to Tibet. Debunking China's latest claims over the reincarnation of Tibet's foremost spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the United States Congress affirmed upon the sole legitimate and indisputable authority of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to determine his succession, and said the US would only follow the instructions laid out by the Dalai Lama with regard to his reincarnation. At a hearing of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on East Asia, the Pacific, the International Cybersecurity Policy, Senator Cory Gardner addressed, stating that
we talked about the Chinese declaration of the next Dalai Lama, and let me be very clear, the United States Congress will never recognize a Dalai Lama that is selected by the Chinese.
The case of China wanting to appoint the next Dalai Lama is a clear example, as they tried to do with the issue of the Panchen Lama. The Dalai Lama has categorically maintained that only he can make a decision on his reincarnation. In 2011, he came out with a formal statement explaining the reincarnation system and how he intends to go about on the issue of his succession. By wanting to select the next Dalai Lama, the Chinese government aims at extending its control on Tibetan Buddhism in the Indo-Pacific region, and with clear geopolitical implications. If not challenged rigorously by three countries, this decision could affect the religious freedom not just of the Tibetans, but of millions of followers of Tibetan Buddhism worldwide.
In 2011, His Holiness the Dalai Lama issued an edit on the future of his reincarnation, as well as the history of the Tulku tradition in Tibetan Buddhism. He said, if it is decided that the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama should continue and there is a need for the 15th Dalai Lama to be recognized, responsibility for doing so will primarily rest on the concerned officers of the Dalai Lama's Gande Photang Trust. This is the end for this week's bulletin of Tibet This Week. See you next time and have a great weekend.